All right, Jay, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Well, thanks for sitting down and having a chat with me.
I love it, Dave.
All right. Well, so for anyone that's watching, we're going to shoot a interview series with Jay Jacobs about West Virginia basketball, but through the eyes of Jay Jacobs because he's seen and done just about everything. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Morgantown, West Virginia, and I spent 35 years there. So I had my grade school, my junior high. In those days, it was 7, 8, 9. And then the high school was 10, 11, and 12. And I went to Morgantown High School.
Morgantown High School. So you were a West Virginia boy through and through.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. So when you were growing up, did you start playing sports early on, or did it take you a while?
No, I'll tell you, my dad was very instrumental in me. And I remember when I was a young kid, maybe 4 or 5 years old, I can go back. And we had a wastebasket, and he gave me a tennis ball, and he had me shoot the tennis ball at the waste paper basket. And then we advanced. We went up to a chandelier, and we got a whole stock and filled it with beans, and I would shoot up then. So I was shooting over at the wastebasket and then up through my 7 and 8 year old time in my life. I was shooting up at that chandelier. So I've had something in my hand, throwing it at something all my life. Well, the set shot was founded because my dad, he said, "This isn't going to work. You're putting one hand on the ball, Jay, but you have no control over it. So let's bring the left hand in with the right hand, and I'll teach you how to shoot the ball with both hands." And it continued from there. And my eye hand coordination then became very good, and I was able to shoot the ball. And I wasn't much of anything else, but shoot it I could really do it. So I got to play with older kids out on the street because they wanted it. Chose me because I could shoot the ball. And as soon as I got it, I had a quick release, and it was all two-hand set shot. So I had two-hand set shot through most of my grade school, junior high, and into high school, where then I had to develop something called a jump shot and a one-handed shot.
Now, when you were small, if it was the same way it was for me growing up, when you're small and you're trying to play basketball, you sort of have to figure out a way to be crafty from a very, very young age because otherwise you're sunk if you can't figure that out.
Well, yeah, you're right. That's a good point because what happened to me, I thought, well, I better learn to control the basketball.
Yeah.
So then I put cones out and I started dribbling in and around basketballs and around those cones with the left hand and the right hand. So I became pretty adept at being able to handle the ball. So that became an asset for me too, being able to dribble the ball, being able to cut with the ball, be able to penetrate with the ball. And that helped me with my shot too.
Speaking of growing up in Morgantown, because you were so close to West Virginia University in proximity, were you really aware of a lot what West Virginia's basketball program? Did you listen on the radio? How did that work for you?
Well, radio was big.
Yeah.
So let's start with that, Dave. And what I did was I got a piece of paper and I knew the players. So yes, I was born and bred West Virginia basketball. So I remember when Lee Patton. Now we're going back with names now. So these are names you might not recognize. He was a coach at West Virginia. Well, he had players that really became good players for him, and he developed them. But he died in a terrible automobile accident,
That's
and that
awful.
might have been in the late 40s, maybe early 50s. I was still a young kid in junior high, but I always followed it, and I got my sheet of paper out. And of course, Jack Fleming was the guy that presented the picture to me through the radio, and so I would keep score at almost every game. So I felt I knew the players
Yeah.
so well. It's just like they were in my house.
Right. Yeah. There's I grew up listening to West Virginia basketball on the radio, but instead of Jack Fleming, it was you and Tony Caridi.
Wow.
And so when I was a little kid, this is still, I grew up in the age of internet almost. But when I was at the age of 3, 4, 5 years old, the internet still hadn't quite made its heyday. And so I would do the same thing. I would listen and I would keep the stats.
Yeah.
And I remember guys like Damian Owens and
Yeah.
Adrian Pledger and those guys and Greg Jones. And I felt like I was very much a part of those like early 90s teams and mid 90s teams.
Well, when you live it, Dave, and you present it and you hear it, and then I had the advantage, which you didn't have, of being in Morgantown.
Right.
So my dad had a clothing store. Well, High Street, the main street in Morgantown, had a whole bunch of clothing stores. But I'd always be outside washing the windows of the store all the time. And these players would come down the street.
Oh, this is great.
Fred Schaus as a player, not as a coach, as a player before he became coach.
Yeah.
Later, he played with the Knicks in the NBA before he came back to West Virginia. Eddie Beach, Eddie Sterling, these guys I all grew up with. And so I got to see them, and my dad made sure that I had season tickets, that he had season tickets. So I started very early with West Virginia University basketball. In fact, my dad took me as a young kid to West Virginia Wesleyan, and we would watch games all day in the West Virginia Conference, where there would be games. Now they play at a smaller level, but there were so many schools in West Virginia. When my dad and I would go over there for 2 or 3 days in a row, watch games from the morning to the evening. So I was embedded with basketball for a very early age.
That's a really nice resource to have when you're right that close to the team.
Yeah.
So when you were listening to the radio as a kid and you were practicing playing basketball all the time, had it dawned on you yet that was sort of a goal that you were going to have?
Playing or broadcasting?
Playing for West Virginia.
Yeah, it was always in the back of my mind, but see, I was small, so I didn't know where I stood. But then I started to gain confidence when I got to high school, because when high school, I was one of the first sophomores, because like I said earlier, junior high was 7, 8, 9. We had a great junior high team, but that transferred over to high school. So as a 10th grader, I was one of the few sophomores who was able to start and participate for Morgantown High School varsity, because they usually didn't do that. They did it with probably different situations where I had the opportunity. And once again, back because I could shoot the ball, I was a player that could do that.
When you made it to Morgantown High School, and you had been playing a little bit, did you get the idea that you were going to get comfortable and start really playing at a higher level there?
Well, it started to dawn on me a little bit, but the players that we had on that team were all upperclassmen. They were juniors and seniors. So they sort of took me under their wing as a sophomore. So I knew that I could shoot the ball, and I knew it was giving me an opportunity. So those guys made sure that I had the basketball, was able to shoot it. Now, was I a big time scorer? No, I was a second or third option in scoring wise on that team as a sophomore. But I think what happened was, as a sophomore, we started to gain success because that team was pretty good. But in West Virginia basketball at that time, what happened, there's so many schools. They haven't consolidated yet. So everybody had a school, and the school in their community was a big time thing. And basketball or football was the main sport. But the smaller schools concentrated on basketball. So the opportunities were there, and we sort of played within our own realm, because in our region, we had teams like West Fairmont, East Fairmont. We had Washington Irving. See, these schools have all consolidated, most of them, and so it made it easier for me. So we had a lot of rivalries during that day, but it helped me to become a better player, there's no doubt about it. I gained experience.
Something about playing with older guys,
yeah,
always brings you into the fold quicker.
Well, it does, Dave. And I think what it does is you start to gain what we talked about earlier. You start to gain confidence.
Right.
But I was never afraid to go out on the court and work hard. I would go out when it would be snowing. And in those days, your basket was on a telephone pole. There wasn't anything running over to the YMCA or running someplace else and playing indoor. You went through the hard work of sweeping the snow off the street, or going in up on the build a basket up on a telephone pole, making sure it was 10 feet high and put a net on. I had to have a net. I couldn't play without a net. So I had to have that net. So that was a big factor for me.
That's interesting. So basketball in those days for you, it was not only like a winter sport, but it was truly a winter sport. You were playing on the snow out there.
Yeah, you're right. I was. Yeah. And then the guys would come down the street, and the weather was cold or the weather was raining. And my dad would say to my mom, "Where's Jay?" And she said, "I could see him out the window." He says, "It's raining." I said, "But he's out there by himself shooting hoops." So I was never afraid to. And I always believed as I got older, and I talked to the kids at West Virginia University a lot of times, I'd say, the harder you work, you think you're working hard, work harder. Because when you work harder, then you become better at and perfected at what you try to do. With that comes confidence. And then your mindset becomes that you're in a zone and you can play this game.
Interesting. So when you talk about that level of confidence, when you were a junior or a senior in high school, did this hard work start to pay off and you felt yourself say, "Hey, give me the ball a little bit"?
Well, I hogged the ball. That's a better word. I never saw a shot, David, I didn't like. So then I became more confident. I thought I could make everything. The problem was, as a sophomore, we lost, as I said earlier, we lost those upperclassmen. So the junior year was not as good. And if I admitted to you honestly, I thought, well, I'm a sophomore, now I'm a junior. Am I the leader yet? No, but I'm thinking too much about myself. How many shots can I get up a game? How many points can I score a game? And it took me really out of my realm. And my junior year was okay, but it was enough to become popular, but not enough in my own mind to become very good. But then, as a senior, we became very, very good. We all molded together. We had a big kid in the middle that we picked up. Then we had a real good point guard who was president of our class. He was smart. He could get the ball to the right people. He knew how to play. And that year then, we went on to the state championship, and we met a guy named Jerry West in the finals.
Aha. Well, we'll definitely want to get to that. That's interesting. So when you play, did you play mainly off the ball on the wing?
Yeah, I did. And that's a good question, because I did. I wasn't a point guard. I was a shooting guard. But now remember, I'm small. But, the teams, and it was really funny in those days because the uniforms were so tight that you wore. It was like a small hotel, had no ballroom. I mean, it just was one of those things where your uniform was so tight against you that it made you move quicker in some ways. In some ways, it didn't too. But I was a shooter, and that way I was a designated shooter. That's what I did. And as a junior, I took more shots than I did as a senior because our team was better as seniors. But then I thought over the summer, hey, this isn't going to work. I can't be just a designated shooter. I've got to be able to do some other things. I've got to use my passing skills. I've got to use my skills to dribble off the ball, make shots on the rim, get to the rim, do that sort of thing. So that improved between my junior and senior year.
Well, as a West Virginia fan, I've got to ask, how were you on defense?
What? Defense? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Defense. No.
So I read somewhere that you ended up playing for the championship in your senior year, but then you say that you guys hit some sort of a wall. And tell me about that.
Well, in the first game, there were 4 teams that made it to the area championship in Morgantown. Our first game was against Parkersburg. And a funny story about that, Parkersburg's colors are red and white, and ours at Morgantown High were red and blue. So when we came out, there was a there was a misunderstanding, miscommunication, because when Parkersburg came out to warm up, they were in their reds. When we came out to warm up, we were in our reds. So the officials came out and saw it and said, this isn't going to work. Well, we were the closest school to the field house. So our coach, a great guy, Jack Roberts, said, we'll go over and make our changes and we'll come out. So then we came out that first game and in our whites, and we won the game, I believe 72-70 on a last second shot by a player we had named Jerry Turner. And with that, in the second game that night was Willie Akers and Mullins against Jerry West and East Bank.
Big
and
names.
That was two, but Jerry was too good for Willie. And they ended up becoming very close friends, as all of us did, because we all came to West Virginia, but we talked about it a lot. But Jerry was just so great in that tournament. He beat Willie on Friday night, and he beat us on Saturday.
Okay, so you ended up playing Jerry West for the championship. And how did you do in that game?
I don't recall. Yeah, I do. I had 23.
That's pretty good.
Well, but that wasn't the 38 the West had. So I became second to that. But no, I had a good game, but I ended up with 7 or 8 assists, and I became more proud of that than anything, because I was then cutting, I was then making penetration. They were double teaming me, so I kicked the ball off, and we had other guys score for us. It just wasn't enough.
When you played against Jerry, did you get the sense that, hey, this guy's really good, or did you think he's incredibly special? Could you really distinguish how good he was?
No, I didn't. But what happened, I knew Jerry because we met we didn't become great friends, but we went to Boys State as juniors in Jackson Mills, West Virginia. Willie was there, Jerry was there, I was there, and we knew each other. But the thing about it is, in those days, Dave, that you had no TV. I couldn't slip on a TV and turn to Channel 13 in Charleston and see what was going on in the Kanawha Valley. I couldn't turn on to Beckley and find out how good Woodrow was doing. If we found anything, every once in a while we saw a Charleston Gazette paper that we could pick in Morgantown. We'd go right to the sports page and find the box scores.
Wow.
And Jerry broke his leg as a junior, so he only played as a senior. But he just got better and better, and that's the story of Jerry's career, because he just got, with every time he went out to practice or play, his game improved. But those days we didn't have the communication skills and the internet to find out how these guys are doing. In fact, the only thing we had Preston County. Now, Preston County is right beside Mon County, where I grew up. Preston County had the small schools. They had Newburgh, they had Brewster Mills, they had Kingwood, they had Tunnelton, Rollsburg. There's probably about 12 of them. And then I came across this kid because they had the Morgantown paper. So I kept seeing this kid from Aurora, West Virginia, Balliard, 29, Balliard, 30. I said, who in the hell is this guy? He just put me in. So one time I got an opportunity to go up and watch a game. Well, you know that room you're sitting in? That's as big as the gym was. Up in Preston County, the gyms were small, and Bucky just was a great player, and he only had one eye. He played with one eye, and he was so good. That's
incredible. That's incredible. Yeah. One eye, man. That's a setback. If you can get over that, you're pretty good. Yeah,
he was just so good.
So Jay, after high school, what was your first move? Did you decide this is what I want to do, or did it just sort of naturally happen?
Well, I think it happened. It must have been in the cards, because after that championship game, I was chosen. I was blessed to be able to play in the West Virginia All-Star game in Williamson, West Virginia, put on by a guy named Jim Van Zant, whose son later coached at Morgantown, and later coached at West Virginia baseball coach. But Jim Van Zant had this idea. He'd bring all the players in for 2 weeks, the best in West Virginia, and they would play a game at Williamson Fieldhouse. So we went down there, and the North played the South. Of course, the South was loaded. It had Jerry, it had Willie, It had a guy named George Ritchie from Chattaroy, had all those Southern schools. Howard Hurt was at Beckley. So those guys were really good. And we lost that game. But then they combined the two teams and took the best off of those teams, stayed there another week, and we played a Kentucky All-Star team. And we played one game in Kentucky, one game in West Virginia. So what happened was that we all sort of bonded. So Fred Schaus, who was the coach then, came down and he offered scholarships to West and to Willie and to myself, and also to a kid named Butch Good from a town called Pineville. So when we went to freshmen the next year, the varsity had Hunley as a senior, but we all were freshmen and we couldn't play at another level. We had to stay as freshmen, but it was a good thing for us.
So all four of those guys that were offered the scholarships, did you?
Yeah, Jim Warren was another one from WI. That freshman team was loaded with West Virginia players. Fred Schaus. Then he picked up a kid from New Jersey named Joe Posh. He picked up Jim Ritchie from Philadelphia. These type of guys but they were they filled in. But then as a freshman team, we played 35 games, Dave. So we were undefeated as freshmen.
Undefeated?
Yeah, won 35 games.
Now, for freshman teams, was there a sort of tournament involved, or do you just play the games and get out of there?
We played the games to get out of there. We played a schedule. We played, at that time, Greenbrier had a military school in Lewisburg. Yep. We played West Virginia Tech, those teams, and we mixed it up. We went over to Ohio. In fact, a great story over at Ohio. I like to shoot the ball, so the game starts at Ohio University. So the first 7 shots, 6 of them are taken by me, that two-hand set shot. So all of a sudden, there's a timeout. And I made, I think, 5 out of 7, 5 out of 6, something like that. So the shots were going in for me. So they called timeout. So I'm wondering, and other players shaking their heads. We go over to Quentin Barnett, our coach, and we wonder. And finally, Quentin said, "Who called timeout? I didn't call timeout." He said to the assistant, Jim Satilli, "Did you call time?" "No, I didn't call timeout." West raised his hand and said, "I called timeout." And Quentin Barnett said, "What's the reason you called timeout?" He said, "Well, I'll tell you. We've either got to get another ball so the rest of us can play with it, and Jacobs can have his own ball, or else we'll play with the one ball. Let's make that decision right now." So I started from then to become a passer.
Did you find this humorous at the time? Or
hell no, I didn't. I mean, I didn't like it because, but we had a great time as freshmen. We didn't travel by bus. We didn't travel by vans. We traveled in cars, Dave. So we went to travel, and Quentin Barnett always had the first car, and he had his 5 guys. Then the second car was Jim Satilli, and we just mixed up who we had in there. But Quentin Barnett would drive 40 miles an hour. Hell, we were never going to get home. So one night I gave this suggestion: look, let's get home. It's late. We've been in Charleston, and it was 5.5 hours. You had to go through Gasaway, Sutton, all those towns to get up there. Yep. So I said, look, when we get to Gasaway, I said to Satilli, the driver assistant coach, just pull around him and take off flying. And Satilli said, "No, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to." He said, "Come on, we're never going to get home if you don't." So finally, we talked him into it. And Satilli takes off and goes right around, and we wave at Quentin Barnett, and we go flying down the road. So then we pull off, get behind a barn, and we hide behind that barn. Here comes Barnett going 80 miles an hour trying to catch us. And we came in behind him. Well, we got home quick that night, I'll tell you that. He chased us.
Him. That's a nice motivation.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Moving into your sophomore year. Well, let me ask this first of all. What was the atmosphere of Morgantown like at that time?
Hunley was a senior, and Hunley was at West Virginia. We're talking about West Virginia University now.
Yeah,
right?
Well, I guess the feel of the town, because now Morgantown has a certain reputation of being a pretty wild and fun college town. Was Morgantown similar to that back in those days?
Not so much. It were a smaller area. Now there was partying, but as freshmen we came in there. One thing you have to understand: Jerry came from East Bank, West Virginia, down in that area, and he wasn't introverted. He just wasn't sure of himself because Morgantown's a big city.
Sure.
But he came and he bonded with Willie Akers, who was from Mullins. And my dad owned a clothing store, and we would hang out in there a lot. But as freshmen, and then I think where there was two pool halls, and Bucky Boyer then was a sophomore there, the kid from Aurora that I talked about. Great pool player, better ping pong player, great pool player.
Oh, I love ping pong.
I'm telling you what, he was great. With one eye, I mean, he was fantastic.
This guy could do everything, huh?
Oh, he could. He was really an athlete. He ended up being a great slow pitch softball player, All-American, because he got old.
Wow.
I mean, he was just really, he died way too young. But anyway, with Bucky, he was the pool shark. So you ended up going to a place called King's Pool Hall, which was at the top of High Street. There, everybody would win, and you would play games for money. The other pool hall was under the Metropolitan Theater called the Met Theater, M-E-T, downstairs, down the stairs in there. And everybody played a lot of pool. But Jerry was never the life of the party because he was never at the party. I mean, his life wasn't recluse. It's just he didn't know how to handle himself. And I think they saw that his freshman year, how good he was going to be. And then Fred Schaus got in and said, okay, we have to put him into courses to teach him how to handle press, because next year we're in New York City, and if this kid's as good as we think he's going to be, he's going to get a lot of questions from a lot of press. And I think it helped Jerry as a sophomore.
Well, let me ask you, how did you handle yourself at a party? You strike me as someone who could have a good time.
At the parties, yeah. I can have a party. You know, I'm not a drinker, and I wasn't a drinker. And
but you still know how to party without the drink.
Well, I know how to have fun, and my personality would gear me because I had to do something because I was so small. So I had a car my dad bought me, but the daggone car was a stick shift, and you could get it into low gear to start it, but then it would jump up to neutral, and it wouldn't go in, just go in neutral. So guys would borrow the car. I'd put it down by the Mountaineer, by the student union. And Bolyard, I would go, my dad would say, hey, isn't that somebody driving your car down the street? I said, oh, yeah, that's Bucky. He borrowed it for the afternoon. So guys just used it all the time. But there was a situation in Morgantown where they talk about, Dave, the fact that was there a situation where you could get stuff free? Well, my dad had people in Charleston who he never knew or he never saw, he never knew their names, that there was open stuff for players to come in and get whatever they wanted out of the store, then give this code, and my dad would then mail the receipts to this box office in Charleston, and it would come back paid. So as far as getting stuff free at that time, yeah, that was happening with our players. So a lot of us had that. Now I didn't need to have that because I was a sweater geek, and I love sweaters. And my dad, when the salesman would come through with sweaters, I would be the first one in there. I'd be checking the examples out.
You call yourself a sweater geek.
Yeah.
What kind of sweaters are we talking?
We're talking crew necks. We're talking turtleneck sweaters. The zip-ons that a lot of kids and people wear today wasn't in tone, but V-necks were big, and so were the crew necks. So I had a lot of those, but I wear them a lot on our broadcast now. I still have some of them from the old store, because Hugs is always teasing me on the show, where'd you get that from the old man store? And I'd say, yeah, that's one of them. So that's 60 years now. That's back there.
So yeah, you've been doing the sweater thing for a long time, Jay.
Yeah, I have. I have been doing it. It's sort of a signature for mine. It's easy to do, and I feel more comfortable in them, so I wear them a lot.
Well, I work at a restaurant and I had to wear black pants every day. And
Oh, but
I got in the habit of wearing these pants every day for years. And I thought I would turn that into my signature. And
yeah.
eventually everyone told me, stop wearing those black pants, Dave. So
So you did?
I finally listened. Yeah, I still wear them, but not every day.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's good.
So when you were moving through your career at WVU, your coach was Schaus?
My coach was Fred Schaus,
Fred
and the
Schaus.
assistant was George King. And they later switched jobs, Dave, because Fred left and went to the Lakers. George became the head coach after I graduated the first year. A lot of my friends played for George in 1961. And then George ended up going to Purdue and becoming the athletic director of Purdue. And
Really?
Fred came back to be his coach at Purdue.
So what was it like playing for these coaches?
Fred was tough, and I tried to keep a sense of humor and keep myself because I thought I was pretty good. But as a sophomore, this team was probably the best West Virginia basketball team, in my opinion, that the school has ever had because they were so good. We were number one in the polls for a long time.
Well, let me cut
And
you off, Jay.
yeah, go ahead.
Since you grew up with West Virginia basketball, what did it feel like being on a team that you perceived to potentially be the best that you'd ever seen? Was it exhilarating?
Oh yeah, it was
Yeah.
quite an honor. It really was
Yeah.
because you're not only living in West Virginia, you're not only playing in the town where the school is located, you're playing for the school that you've loved all your life and have followed since you were a young puppy.
Right.
So it's all there. And so yeah, it was a big deal for me
I,
personally.
I believe that. Any particular stories from your junior and senior year that stands out?
Well, more the sophomore year, I remember that one game we were playing against Duke, and Duke was number one, and we were number two, and we were playing in the field house. So I came down and thought, hell, I'm not going to get in this game. So I didn't put my shorts on. I didn't put my game shorts on. I just put the pullover and then the tops. So I remember coming over in the locker room and West and Akers seeing me do this, and they came over and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not going to get in this game, guys." So hell, when the game's over, I want to get in the dressing room. I want to get my clothes off. I got a date. I'm going. I'm going. I'm out of here. No shower, no nothing. So the game, I did it. So I'm out warming up, and those guys are looking at me. So I go to the end of the bench, my seat, because I knew I wasn't going to play. And the game starts. So Ronnie Renton, Mary Lou's dad, who's still alive, lives in Fairmont, great guy. He sprains his ankle. And so they got to go to the bench because he's out. So the number two guy is Bucky Balliard. So Bucky goes in and he's so aggressive, he gets 3 fouls right in a row. So Fred has to have a point guard. So he yells down the bench, Jacobs, Jacobs. And
I bet you're sweating bullets.
I said, Butch Good. I said to Butch, I can't go in. Hell, I can't go in the game. Butch says, why not? I said, I don't have my uniform on.
Oh, no.
I said, no, I don't have a uniform. He said, well, they're calling. So Wes knew and Willie knew they were up near Fred. Shouts the coach. So they didn't say anything. They looked down to me and go, I told you. I told you. So I had to go up and I said, Coach, I'm sorry, but excuse me, I can't go into the game. I can't go in. Fred said, what do you mean you can't go in? I said, I don't have my uniform on. He said, go back and sit down. You know, my playing days as a sophomore ended right there. I saw very little action the rest of the way.
Yeah, wow. Man, that, you know what? It's almost worth it for the story.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but it's a true one.
It's a good story. God. Yeah.
But you know, when Huntley was a senior, and we were freshmen, we played the preliminary game, the first 5 games to the varsity game. Do you know that Western University made a change and made the varsity game with Hunley the first game, and West and all of us played what would be in the varsity game spot at 8 o'clock. We played, normally they played the JV game as varsity players, and we played the varsity game as freshman team. And they packed it. They packed it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's probably the only time that would have ever happened. Yeah.
I don't ever remember, and I've been around Morgantown for a long time. I don't ever remember that happening. Yeah. No, but it did.
So after you finished playing, did you want to stay in Morgantown, and did you keep in touch with the other guys?
Well, a funny story happened to me. Morgantown High came back into it because I wanted to get my master's. And to get my master's, I didn't want, first of all, my dad wanted me to go into the business, and I didn't want the business. I did not want the clothing business. I like to wear the clothes. I just didn't like to sell them. So I just wasn't into that gig. So I was over talking, I would hang out over Morgantown High. And one day I said to Jack Roberts, our coach, who was the coach there then, I said, you know, you have anything over here where you could use somebody getting his master's to help out? And he said, yeah, I'd love to have you come over. Well, we were zone pressing that. The press was a big thing under Fred Schaus. Mm-hmm. And so I brought that to Morgantown High, and I ended up doing a lot of coaching, more than probably what I was allowed to. Well, we were very successful. So then I knew that I wanted to finish up coaching. So I got my degree in secondary education, which with an emphasis in administration. So I eventually ended up down the road as a assistant principal in school.
Good deal. Well, Jay, I tell you what, from what I've read about your life, this seems like a good time that we'll stop, and then we'll segue into your inevitable comeback to WVU.
Oh, that'd be great, Dave.
All right.
Great talking.
Yeah, great talking to you, Jay. And I will see you next time. Okay.
Okay. Will do. All right.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.